This video discusses how Europe's current crises stem not from fate but from deliberate policy choices by its leaders, who are criticized for prioritizing U.S. geopolitical interests over European welfare. It highlights the lack of autonomy among European leaders, their involvement in the Ukraine conflict as a proxy war against Russia, the economic repercussions of aligning with U.S. policies like sanctions and pipeline sabotage, and the broader implications of these actions leading Europe towards potential military and economic disaster. It calls for a shift towards independent and peace-oriented leadership to steer Europe away from this path of destruction. The elites in Europe are destroying it again. The plight of Europe in the contemporary era is not a tale of misfortune or inevitable decline, but rather the outcome of a series of calculated decisions by its political elite, which have systematically eroded the well-being of its citizens. This narrative unfolds against a backdrop where lessons from the harrowing experiences of 2 world wars appear to have been forgotten or ignored. Part 1: Historical Amnesia and Modern Militarism. Europe's leaders, having witnessed the catastrophic consequences of war in the 20th century, should logically advocate for peace and stability. However, the current European political landscape is marked by a surprising willingness to engage in, or at least tolerate, the brinkmanship of conflict. This behavior indicates not just a failure to learn from history, but a deliberate choice to align with policies that could lead to another continental disaster. The recurring theme of war, seemingly unchanged over the decades, is driven by imperial ambitions, unchecked by democratic accountability, and amplified by media narratives that often serve to obscure rather than elucidate the truth. Part 2: Puppets of Power. The metaphor of Europe as a geopolitical plaything in the hands of its own leaders and their transatlantic allies paints a stark picture. Leaders like Ursula von der Leyen, Kaja Kallas, and others have been criticized for their apparent subservience to U.S. foreign policy, which has historically aimed to maintain or expand American hegemony. This dynamic has led to decisions like the support for sanctions against Russia, participation in the Ukraine conflict, and the disruption of vital energy links like the Nord Stream pipelines, all of which prioritize foreign agendas over national or continental interests. Part 3: Vladimir Putin's Critique. Putin's recent critique of European leaders as dancers to the American tune at the Collective Security Treaty Organization's summit highlights a critical point. Many European leaders lack the autonomy to act in their nation's best interests. This dependency has led to a situation where European policies often reflect more of Washington's strategic goals than the collective will or needs of the European populace. Part 4: A Proxy War by Any Other Name. The ongoing conflict in Ukraine, openly acknowledged by figures like Boris Johnson as a proxy war, showcases the extent to which European leaders are willing to engage in, or at least not prevent, conflicts that serve external interests. This involvement, lacking in peace initiatives, is not just about geopolitical chess, but has real, devastating impacts on European citizens, from economic sanctions to the potential for escalation into nuclear conflict. Part 5: Intelligence and Misinformation. The role of intelligence agencies like MI6, with figures like Richard Moore pointing fingers at Russia for destabilization while ignoring the West's own contributions to the conflict, underscores a narrative control that stifles honest discourse about the roots of the crisis. This selective outrage fails to address the provocative arming of Ukraine, which directly challenges Russian security, potentially leading to a tit-for-tat escalation. Part 6: Preparing for the Worst. The advice from some European governments to prepare for war through building shelters and stockpiling reflects a grim acceptance of the direction set by current policies. This preparation for potential disaster directly contradicts the post-war European dream of peace and cooperation, signaling a regression into fear and militarism. Part 7. Economic Fallout. The economic consequences of these geopolitical maneuvers are profound. Europe's decision to align with U.S. sanctions against Russia, coupled with the sabotage of the Nord Stream pipelines, has led to soaring energy prices, industrial decline, and economic instability. Germany's economic woes, as reported by the Financial Times, are a stark example where high energy costs are decimating key sectors. Yet the media often skirts around the geopolitical reasons for this downturn. Part 8. The Trump Tariff Threat. The potential reimposition of heavy tariffs by a future Trump administration adds another layer to Europe's economic challenges, potentially isolating European industries further and exacerbating the economic decline. Part 9. A Call for Change. The current trajectory of Europe, driven by leaders more concerned with external approval than internal peace and prosperity, necessitates a profound rethinking. The historical Russophobia, a remnant of Cold War tensions, needs to be addressed not with more conflict but through dialogue, respecting each nation's security concerns. The path forward requires leaders who can think independently, prioritize peace, and foster economic and cultural ties that benefit all of Europe, not just serve the interests of a select few or foreign powers. This expansion not only delves deeper into the complexities of Europe's current state, but also calls for a re-evaluation of its leadership, urging for a shift towards policies that truly reflect the democratic will and historical lessons of peace over perpetual war. The conclusion, the narrative of Europe's current tribulations, is one of self-inflicted wounds, driven by a political class more aligned with external agendas than with the needs and peace of their own constituencies. The dependency on U.S. foreign policy has not only constituencies. The dependency on U.S. foreign policy has not only compromised Europe's sovereignty, but also its economic stability and security. The path forward requires a reawakening of European political consciousness, where leaders act with true independence, fostering diplomacy over discord and economic collaboration over confrontation. Only through such a transformation can Europe hope to reclaim its identity as a beacon of peace, prosperity, and cultural richness, rather than a chessboard in global power games. The call is clear for Europe to rediscover its agency, to engage in genuine dialogue with all nations, including Russia, and to prioritize the well-being of its citizens above all else.